Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's event at the American Enterprise Institute. What can we learn from Louisiana's progress in K-12 education? I'm Robert Pondiscio. I'm a senior fellow here at AEI. It is my privilege to host this discussion as we explore one of the most compelling stories in American education today. Over the last several years, Louisiana has emerged as a standout in K-12 education, achieving historic gains on national benchmarks, most particularly the nation's report card, NAEP. These accomplishments didn't happen by accident. They're the result of deliberate policy choices, a focus on foundational principles, and a commitment to empowering educators and families alike. So today we're here to unpack what's driving this progress and what other states might take away from Louisiana's example. From a back to basics approach under Superintendent Cade Brumley's leadership to innovative efforts like the Let Teachers Teach initiative and the expansion of school choice, Louisiana seems to have found a way to blend pragmatism with ambition. We're going to dig into the specifics. How has the state leveraged high quality curricula and professional development? What role has teacher coaching played? And how does Louisiana's model compare to other states that were once in a similar position? So this isn't just a Louisiana story, it's a national one with lessons for anyone interested or invested in improving education outcomes. We'll get started today with a presentation from Superintendent Cade Brumley. That'll be followed by a panel discussion with some of the sharpest minds in education policy and practice. So before we begin, let me introduce that panel. First, of course, we have Dr. Cade Brumley. He is Louisiana's State Superintendent of Education. He's been in that role since 2020. His leadership has brought the state to its highest ever national rankings with a focus on quality instruction, educational freedom, and teacher empowerment. Next, Ann Bowles, the Senior Director of Programs at the Council of Chief State School Officers, where she shapes strategy for teaching, learning, and curriculum support across 15 states. Then Kelly Morris, a literacy and learning specialist with 20 years of experience in Louisiana classrooms. She's now a key player in the state's reading revival, which supports teachers and students in the science of reading. And finally, Dr. Darlene Opfer, Distinguished Chair in K-12 Education Policy at RAND, whose extensive research on teacher practice and policy offers a national perspective on Louisiana's achievements. So please join me in welcoming them as we kick off with Superintendent Brumley's presentation. Kay, take it away.
Oh, thanks, Robert. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you for honoring me with the opportunity to simply tell Louisiana's story. It's such a privilege to work alongside so many great educators in our state, policymakers, business and industry leaders, parents to support the work that is taking place. And so I believe you guys are geared up to help me with that particular presentation. And so if we could go ahead and begin that presentation, that would be great. So I have a few slides that I'd like to share with the group, starting here with Louisiana's national ranking on NAEP, on the nation's report card, since 2013. What we decided to do in this particular chart is just take a 10-year look back of where we were and the progress to getting to ultimately where we are today. As you can see in both of the grade levels, both 4th and 8th grade, and in both of the content areas, you see that from roughly 2013 through 2017, you see a small decline in those national rankings. And then as we move up into 2019, 2022, and then 2024, what you see is a significant increase moving into 2024 in all of those areas. So if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. I would share that on all 4 of those areas, both 4th and 8th grade reading and math, we have essentially achieved our highest ever national ranking, which is really good news. This chart specifically lays out our national ranking relative to literacy. You can see that again from 2013 all the way until 2019, that's roughly flat. And then we made some progress in 2022 and then really jump up there in 2024 and are proud of where we stand. I will acknowledge as a shout out to all of the individuals working in the state of Louisiana that we have led on the nation's report card for 2 consecutive NAEP cycles in fourth grade reading. So leading the country on 2 consecutive NAEP cycles on fourth grade reading. We're really proud of that work. We think our strategy is the right strategy for teaching kids how to read. Next slide. As you can see on this slide, we are also making progress in math in fourth grade, not to the level that we're seeing the progress in reading, but I would say here that our math policy work has not been as extensive as our reading policy work has been over the last few years. But again, you see beginning in 2017, that gradual climb in fourth grade math. I do project that over the next NAEP cycles, hopefully NAEP cycles, we will see that math accelerate in fourth grade in the same way that we've seen it in reading, simply because we are beginning from a policy standpoint and a practice standpoint to mirror math policy and practice after the work that we have done in reading. Would point out that while we led the country on 2 consecutive cycles in fourth grade reading, this particular year on this cycle, we were in the top 5 in the country for movement in fourth grade math. Next slide. Eighth grade reading, similarly, you see a rise in those national rankings. We like the movement that we are seeing here in eighth grade in terms of the national rankings. What we're not as excited about is we haven't seen the scale score growth that we would like to see in both eighth grade reading and in eighth grade math. I've answered this question a number of times, but obviously these students in eighth grade last year were very pandemic impacted, not just in the state of Louisiana, but across the country. So that ranking too, nationally for reading in eighth grade, is Louisiana's highest ranking. Next slide, please. So eighth grade math, again, looking at the national rankings, you see holding constant from 2013 all the way to 2019. And then you begin to see that uptick in 2022 and in 2024. Louisiana is one of only 14 states to post gains in eighth grade math. Next slide. This is looking at actual scale scores that you see at this point. This is fourth grade scale scores in both reading and math. We're very proud of this particular chart because this is not just around a national ranking. This has to do actually with absolute performance in those scale scores. And so what you see is an uptick there in both reading and math on those scale scores, and we're proud of that progress that we've been able to make, specifically since the 2022 cycle. Next slide. This is eighth grade. Again, as I've called out, our absolute performance in eighth grade is not what we would like to see. Our movement in the national rankings in eighth grade is more of a factor of other states falling than Louisiana students actually moving in absolute performance. And so if you look at math, you see a decline there from 2019 to 2024. Whereas if you look at reading, you basically see that we've held status over that period of time. And so we've been very clear in calling out that, we think in fourth grade that you are seeing students benefit from that comprehensive set of reforms that we've put forward. Not as much in the eighth grade, because most of those reforms were more tailored toward those elementary grades. So you have that issue. You also have that the eighth graders were more pandemically impacted. I do think once we move into additional cycles of NAEP in years to come, our eighth grade results will improve because we will start to see those elementary students matriculate up into the middle grades, and they, I believe, will have had a better educational experience of higher quality. Next slide. Really excited about this particular slide. This shows Louisiana's growth with students with disabilities. And so you see there in the blue Louisiana in 4th and 8th grade reading and math with our students with disabilities as compared to the national average of growth with students with disabilities. Again, you see here that our 4th grade students are showing more growth. But what is different here than I think in other slides is that our students with disabilities in 8th grade are showing growth as well. Next slide. Again, for the benefit of absolute transparency, I think the scale scores are super important. And looking at those scale scores, you see again here students with disabilities in Louisiana in the blue and the national average students with disabilities in the purple. And what you see across the entire spectrum of 4th grade and 8th grade reading and math on absolute performance on these scale scores, Louisiana students with disabilities are outperforming the national average of like students. Next slide. Also want to show growth among economically disadvantaged students. You see here again in the blue, 4th grade math and reading for students that are coming from economically disadvantaged families, showing growth, 8th grade holding status, whereas with the exception of 4th grade math across the entire country, you are seeing a decline. So again, really pleased with what we're seeing there in the 4th grade with students that are economically disadvantaged. Next slide, please. Scale scores, I agree and believe that we have to continue to show the scale scores, not just a ranking. You can see with scale scores with students that are economically disadvantaged, Louisiana outperforming the national average in all of these categories with like students from other states from economically disadvantaged homes. Next slide. And this is just overall performance on national rankings with our internal calculations. You can see back in 2013 where we ranked. It is at its lowest mark there in 2017. 2019, we moved to 49th overall among the states. In 2022, you see the movement there. I think we're 43rd among the states. And now in 2024, among the states, Louisiana ranks 32nd on the nation's report card. That is the highest ranking that the state of Louisiana has ever received since 2000 in this particular model of the nation's report card. So I would just add here that we remain pleased, but ultimately not satisfied. And we know that we still have work to do, but that is a testament to educators across the great state of Louisiana and the work that they're doing to help support kids and their families. Next slide. And I think that does complete our presentation to open up, Robert. And so certainly welcome any questions. And again, honored just to tell the story of what we are working to do here in the state of Louisiana.
Well, I'll take the prerogative asking the first question or two, Cade, and I'll start with a confession. Despite the fact that I work for an education policy think tank, if you push me, I will confess that I'm a little skeptical. I don't want to say cynical, but skeptical about the ability to pull levers at state houses and change classroom practices. In classrooms across the state. So that in my work, I tend to focus on curriculum, instruction, and school culture and whatnot because of that inherent skepticism. So your work challenges my preconceived notions. So do me the kindness of divorcing me of this long cherished notion that I've had that it is hard to pull levers in state houses and change what happens in classrooms. How are you doing it?
Well, first, whenever I have conversations with individuals, I share that, being a school leader, a school principal, one has the opportunity to make almost immediate change. If you see that students aren't performing well in a particular area, you ramp up tutoring. If you have a particular class that's not doing well, maybe you make a personnel shift. There are things that you can do very immediately as a school leader, even not as much, but as a system leader, that can happen. But once you get to the SEA, once you get to that state level, Robert, as you mentioned, it is more difficult to be able to determine, what can you do to impact change? And so I think that I have, no offense to my friends out there, but I think I have the best staff of any SEA in the country. The Louisiana Department of Education, we are really strong. We're a really strong team, and we're constantly thinking about what levers do we have available to make change. Typically, those are policy. Typically, those are finance. I would add one that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, and that's relationship and conversation. And so we are consistently thinking about what policy shifts or finance levers that we can pull to get better outcomes for kids. And I think that we are, no, I don't think, I know we are pretty aggressive. We are pretty aggressive in our work to help to make sure that kids are able to read, that they can do math, that they're in a high quality seat. And so for us, even looking at the work of the nation's report card, it's hard for us to be arrogant because too many kids in Louisiana still can't read on grade level. They're performing poorly in math, or they are presently sitting on this day in a school that's failing them. And so while we can celebrate some progress, we know that we still have work to do, and we are actively seeking solutions to make those areas better.
And one other question before we throw it open to our panel. I don't think I was as focused, and thank you for putting this in your presentation. Until now, I don't think I quite grasped the difference that Louisiana has made for students with disabilities and the economically disadvantaged. That was some stunning data you posted there. Anything you'd like to shed light for the benefit of 49 other state chiefs about how you're creating that remarkable growth?
Well, particularly with students with disabilities, we began a work there probably 4 years ago, really aligned towards better academic outcomes for students with disabilities, but also greater access to service and supports for families. We launched what we call our special education playbook. And we have been training leaders across the state of Louisiana on how to employ our special education playbook. And so essentially, to cut through the noise of a multi-page playbook that we have issued, it's simply an inclusive practice of making sure that students with disabilities have access to high quality instructional materials that are on grade level. It's making sure that to all extents possible that they are pushed in both academically and socially with their peers and having access to content area experts. I feel like we spent too much time as a state and as a country isolating students in self-contained classes and asking one teacher to be the expert in chemistry and world history and English 4. And it's really hasn't been fair to special education professionals. And so what we're doing is we're trying to push those kids where they have access to high quality instructional materials, where they have access to the highest quality of teaching with supports from special education professionals, as well as extended time on task for those kids. And also ramped up tutoring efforts for those students. And so we have this comprehensive playbook that we've employed around special education. We've trained individuals. We've also incentivized pay for special education professionals to use differentiated pay to pay special education teachers more. We've paid for people to go into the special education place. We have built aspiring leaders programs to develop a cadre of special education leaders across the state. And we have really taken an approach of being more inclusive of students with disabilities into that normal gen ed academic program.
Let's bring some of the other panelists into the conversation. I want to start with Kelly Morris. So Cade Brumley has been the state superintendent for 5 years. In terms of tenure, I think you've got him beat by a factor of 4. You've been spent two decades working in Louisiana, so I think probably have a particularly good lens on how the landscape has shifted in your state. You've seen a lot of these changes, positive changes firsthand. Could you compare and contrast for us, just where was the state 20 years ago? Where are you now? What shifts have you seen?
Sure, absolutely. So, 20 years has been a long time. So, in education, and, we often hear about that pendulum that swings back and forth. So for me, the biggest piece is that it's been consistent for the past few years, and we've built upon that consistency. So, I'm going to start, I guess, really with early childhood and the work we've done with that space. You look back 20 years ago and what we were doing in early childhood. isn't where we are today. And so I think that has really allowed us to shift our attention to our K-3 supports. But going into that next piece is really focusing on what the state has put forth, and that starts with the standards. Looking at where we were with GLEs and now where we are, we've really leveled the playing field for our students and allowed us to really perform nationally. And so I think that's why we're really seeing the gains that we're seeing with our students because of the standards that have been put forth that are more rigorous, which then goes hand in hand, of course, with our curriculum. So we now look at where we were with curriculum to where we are now with curriculum. And the curriculum is tier one. It's, stakeholders come together, they figure out the best quality, most rigorous curriculum provided. So whether you're down in St. Tammany Parish or you're up in Concordia Parish, you're going to be receiving that tier one mandated curriculum that's been provided by LDOE and really looked upon, with a lot of insight and making sure that our students are getting the most quality education possible across the board. So that's been huge to me. And that's been a huge difference from the beginning, what I have seen at least. I think another big piece, of course, is the professional development we're providing around the curriculum. That's been huge. We've seen literacy coach programs in schools, but now we are really providing supports within that curriculum, guiding our teachers on how to support them with that curriculum, with their resources, differentiating, talking about our students with disabilities. They are in a lot of the classrooms. And so we want to make sure not only are we helping our students that are maybe lower achieving students that are, there's some gaps there, we're also looking at our students that are higher. So that curriculum is also allowing us to really focus on the differentiation within our classrooms, which has been, I think that's why we're seeing a lot of that growth. I think it also goes with the family engagement piece that's been put forth. You look on their website and they're constantly looking for ways to support our school districts with how to help get families involved and making sure that they have those resources. When students for example, take the Dibbles assessment every middle, beginning, middle, and end. They now are sending home information to parents to help them understand what is this assessment that they're taking. So that's huge as well. I have a 20-year-old and I have an 8-year-old. So when I look at what I saw with my 20-year-old versus where I am with my 8-year-old son, it's been amazing to see the transformation come alive. And I'm seeing the progression happen not only in the schools that I am in across the state in 15 different schools, I'm also seeing it at home on the forefront. So it's really nice to see some of the programs they've also put in place, and I feel like they're quick on their feet. So for example, during COVID, we had that happen, but we quickly implemented, okay, learning loss. So now we have the summer programs to help support our students with that. There's high dose tutoring happening. So I feel like that piece has been huge, just kind of covering all of our bases to make sure that we're really supporting our schools across the state and they're all in the same level playing field. So there's a lot to be said. I think our educators, as Dr. Brumley has said, has really laid some groundwork, but it is also it starts at the top. And I think the consistency for me watching this kind of come alive, it's been very consistent for the past 5 years. And that's what we need. We need that consistency. We need that accountability. And so if we continue to move in this direction, of course, our students are going to be successful. And so I'm really proud of the work taking place and happy to be a part of it and very honored to be here in the state of Louisiana as we watch this growth.
Kelly, you alluded a moment ago to so-called tier one curriculum, and I want to make sure that I'm correct about this because the first time Louisiana really kind of emerged on my radar screen as
Yes.
somebody who follows curriculum instruction was about 10 years ago under Cade's predecessor, John White and Rebecca Cochler, where they tiered curricula and the so-called tier one curricula were chosen by teachers. They met. They were two standards. They were rigorous, etc. And then, if I'm not mistaken, incentives were put in place to incentivize districts to, as Rebecca said, to make the right choice, the easy choice. But can you just share? You're alluding to this. I assume this is so. Are all the districts in Louisiana now using so-called tier one curricula?
Yes. And so that's been the biggest, just kind of looking back over the course 5, 10 years per se, just looking at where we were to where we are today. The curriculum has just, it's more rigorous, it's more driven. It allows us to really, like I said, level the playing field, whether you're down in a lower parish or you're up in the upper parishes, you're all getting that same rigorous curriculum. So that's
And can
huge
you,
for us.
oh, sorry to interrupt. Can you name drop some of those curricula? Like I know you've got the Louisiana guidebooks for
Sure.
ELA. I think Corn College is on as a tier one curricula. What are some of the so-called tier one curricula that?
So Wit and Wisdom, CKLA. CKLA is in a lot of my schools, and it really focuses on those foundational skills, really bridging the gap for our students in that early pre-K or K through third. And of course, CKLA is going up as well. There's other supports that they can receive for the upper grades, but it really focuses on those foundational skills and allows our students and our teachers to be more equipped. So it allows them to have those resources that you're looking at, like I said, the differentiation, but also the assessments. So that backwards planning, making sure that there's standards based where we're focusing on those standards, really focusing on that goal at mind and going back and really working through some of the work. And the resources with that, it's not just providing the tier one curriculum to our teachers, it's also that professional development that's been behind that piece. And so I think that also goes hand in hand. We have teachers from all walks of life. We have people that are coming back into education. We have veteran teachers. We have some that are still working on certifications. So it allows them to kind of have that understanding of what is expected of their day, and really provide the best quality tier one curriculum to their students every single day, as well as intervention. And that's a huge piece that I've seen with the curriculum as well, is providing that intervention support as well. So, there's a lot going on, but it's really working. And I think over the course of the past 4 years, I've seen my schools really work through some of the new material, learning how to address those areas of need, and providing systematic instruction to make sure that we're providing the best quality education to our students.
Thank you. Curriculum is a good transition to Ann Bowles and her work at CCSSO, where she's part of the Instructional Materials and Professional Development Network, the so-called IMPD network, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Ann, it was born of watching Louisiana's work in curriculum a decade ago. Could you provide a little bit of background on the work that you're doing with curriculum, how it started, how it works, and to the degree to which you're seeing some of these same lessons that Louisiana has learned in the states that you work with?
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to. The short answer is yes. The IMPD network was very much inspired by the tremendous work in Louisiana. So at CCSSO, we lead a number of different professional learning opportunities for our members, state education agencies. One of those is what we affectionately call the IMPD network, which is the Instructional Materials and Professional Development Network. It actually started back in 2017. So we took a group of chief academic officers from another peer-to-peer learning group that we run, the Chief Academic Officer and Chief Talent Officer Collaborative. We actually took them on a site visit because there was a lot of word on the street, right, about the changes and the policies that Louisiana was implementing. And we had a group of CAOs who actually traveled to Louisiana for this site visit. And after visiting several classrooms in several different schools and observing nearly all students engaging in this consistent grade level work, those state leaders came to CCSSO and asked us to form the network so that they could really learn from one another and from experts to really do this in their own states. And so the vision of the network is very student-centered. It's very much that every student, every day is engaged in meaningful, affirming grade level instruction. And so to realize this vision, research really does suggest that high quality, standards-aligned curricula and professional learning, very much what Kelly and Dr. Brumley were emphasizing there, are really crucial. And so the states in the network, they're approaching it in different ways, and we can get into that. But essentially, they're providing supports, guidance, and funding to school districts to adopt and implement high quality instructional materials. And then, of course, that curriculum aligned professional learning, and then aligning supports to that. So I know Kelly mentioned that high dosage tutoring, aligning that to that, interventions and supports, aligning that to that high quality core instruction. So that students are, when they're have interventions or supports, it's preparing them to access that high quality tier 1 instruction. So in all this work, districts still have choice. They make selections that fit their needs. They can modify and tailor the instructional materials to meet their students' needs. But essentially, the state is just making it easier for districts and schools to access quality material and easier to get the capacity and supports they need to implement in the classroom. And then in terms of progress, I mean, we're so fortunate. We get to work with 15 states across the country, and the states have made tremendous progress. So in 5 states, we have more than 80% of the students statewide now have access to high quality instructional materials. And this is, prior to this happening, it wasn't being tracked. So 2017 is the earliest we really have some of that baseline data from, but they've just been tremendous increases. And then we also have a partnership with RAND, and through some of the data from RAND, we see that a significantly greater proportion of teachers in most IMPD network states actually report using at least one fully aligned curricula, more so than the national average. And of course, we know that instructional materials are not this silver bullet, and I think that's what's so important and what we've really learned from Louisiana and from the states that are in the network, that it's this comprehensive strategy. It's a consistent, they're staying the course and they're building and iterating on what they're working. And it's really focused on that, student level classroom. They're engaging in consistent grade level instruction.
Jarlene Opfer, I'm particularly pleased and glad that you could join us today, because I kind of think of you as my Louisiana whisperer in a sense, where over the years when I've written about Louisiana, whether you realize it or not, you've been on speed dial for me. So in your work, following what Louisiana has done for at least a decade or more, what distinguishes? It's basically the same question I asked Cade. What distinguishes Louisiana from other states in terms of policy implementation, and how that affects classroom practice? What has your research shown you?
Yeah, well, first I want to say that my colleague Julia and I have been with Louisiana, I think, more than a decade at this point. And it's been, we're really grateful to them and to be able to see the progress that they've made. And one of the things that I sort of, both of us, I think, reiterate over and over again, and Cade mentioned this, Kelly mentioned this, is how consistent they are. So when Cade talks about people at the state level, there is not anybody we have ever spoken with at the state level who isn't on the same page. And I think that that's really unusual, because it doesn't matter who we talk to in their Department of Ed, they all understand what the goals are, what the structure is, what the levers are, what the procedures are. So that is, I think, unique, is just having that kind of focus for both in its intensity and for sort of how long they've had it. But then I think the second thing is they've done a really excellent job in sort of Anne's discussion about the states that are working on curricula and professional development. They just did a really excellent job of getting down into the classroom. They did this in a lot of different ways, but their communication strategies, their reliance on teachers as leaders, teachers as becoming experts on their own curricula, I think that's really what differentiates them. So, we've all been pushing high quality curricula for a long time, but our own work at RAND says that, even if you adopt it, teachers won't necessarily use it. Louisiana has made a huge effort in making sure that their teachers can use it. They don't tell them they have to, but they've provided all the supports in terms of ongoing professional development, messaging from the state and from the districts that is consistent and clear. Kelly mentioned differentiation. That was huge. I think, all of the practice guides, we see this over and over again, that teachers reject high quality curricula if if they have a lot of students who are underachieving because they think that the curricula is too hard. One of the things Louisiana spent a lot of time on is helping teachers understand how to differentiate. So teachers aren't now going to Google in Louisiana. They may still be, but not at the rates we're seeing in lots of other states, because they have resources. They can say, okay, how do I make this lesson work for my students? And I think that really sets Louisiana apart.
And that's created by Louisiana teachers, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it was all done in the state by the teachers who just understand their curricula.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the work of David Steiner at Johns Hopkins, who's made this point serially over the years that a lot of time the so-called HQIM stays on the shelf for exactly the
Mhm.
reason that you just cited. And sure, then the
Absolutely.
teachers are going to share my lesson, and teachers pay teachers. If you've created a solution by and for your own state's teachers, that's got to make a big difference. Kelly and Cade, feel free to jump in on this one as well. I'm reminded a couple of years ago when we were all talking about Mississippi, Carrie Wright then couldn't finish two sentences without saying coaching. You know, it was coaching, it's coaching. And I hear a lot of the same about Louisiana. Kelly and Cade, could you just weigh in on on the role of coaching in these games?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I've been doing the coaching model here with the Center for Literacy and Learning for 4 years. And so for me, it's not that one time go in, do the PD and leave. It's consistent. And so I've worked with the same set of school districts and same set of schools for the past 4 years. So number one, I've built relationships with them. Number two, we have that trust piece where they trust me. I'm able to have real conversations with them about the work that they're doing. It is not a one size fits all model. So, like, one school might look completely different than another school. And so, really developing them through all the areas that we've been discussing. The curriculum, of course, tier one intervention, making sure that we're looking at students. When I first started, some of my students, teachers did not have the access to how to utilize intervention. They might have had it on their schedule, but they might have not really actually been doing intervention. So that was the first piece I wanted to lay the groundwork for. We need to have an intervention time. We need to make sure that we're using quality intervention. So year two, I kind of came in and said, okay, now we need to really make sure that when we're doing intervention, we're looking at the data, we're making sure that we're targeting the students based on their needs, and really making sure that it's like prescribed to them. Like, this is what this student needs. They need phonemic awareness, or they need to be working on fluency, or there's some decoding concerns. And so that's been a huge piece. And so by year three for me, it's been more so, how do I get my middle school, junior high, and high schools doing this? And, my first year I had one high school and junior high, and now I have five. And so I think we're going to also see this play out where now we're not just looking at it from our biddies, our K-3 population. We're looking at it from that middle school perspective. Like, how do we make sure that we're continuing to see this growth? We know, teacher training wasn't, for me, for example, we didn't have that in universities back then. And so now we see some of our veteran teachers, they might not know how to teach that intervention. So providing that support to these coaches and making sure that it's not just a one and done kind of, here's your PD, go back to your classroom. It's ongoing, it's consistent, it's building those relationships. And then the big thing for me is having that partnership with LDOE. We meet once a month. We talk about the things that we need to work on. We have those real conversations, making sure that our teachers, our coaches, our school districts have access, and they know that some of these websites and some of these resources are available to them, knowing that they're available to the families. And so ensuring that it's that full circle of really making sure that we address all the needs of all. But it goes back to that relationship building. It goes back to that trust and making sure boots are on the ground every day. It's that immediate real-time feedback. For me this year, I'm working with my coaches on having those real conversations with teachers. It's not all about, of course, we want to be positive and upbeat with them, but we want to really make sure we're here to make the changes that are needed in that real-time action. So that's been a big piece that we're focusing on this year, is really, we've got all the systematic things in place, but now we need to start really pushing forward to be better than where we were. And so I think accountability, building these relationships, partnering with LDOE, having those resources, consistently staying on the schools and having real conversations has made a huge impact. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of growth happen across the state.
Cade, do the coaches work for you or do they work for the districts?
They work for the districts. But what I would share, Robert, is I've always said that I felt like Louisiana as a state has over a period of 20 years had the right state leader at the right time. And so when we think about curriculum and HQIM, you and I have talked about this over and over. Louisiana has had a longstanding commitment, a decade at least strong, on HQIM and working to make sure students had access to high quality instructional materials. But even so, I mean, I know over the last 5 years, whenever we came in, we still found, even with that work, some of the systems using resources that included whole language or balanced literacy or three queuing materials. And so even though we had this longstanding dedicated commitment to HQIM, there was still work to do. And so we've tried to continuously improve upon that process, respecting the work that had already been done. And then we also really went all in on this development piece of the teacher led by other teachers, this teacher leader piece where teachers have access to a teacher leader weekly that is providing them support and coaching, modeling practices in their classrooms, providing follow-up support. And really, we feel like we've taken this model to scale across the state after running a small pilot back in the fall of 2020. Alongside that, we have raised expectations. I look across the country and not calling out names, but I see some states that lowered the bar. We've done just the opposite. We've raised the bar. We've said, this isn't good enough. Where we are now is not going to work. We have to get better. And so to do that, we've raised the bar in terms of accountability expectations, believing that our teachers and leaders can help get our kids there. It may not happen overnight, but we believe it will happen. We believe that if we continue to push in with HQIM, if we continue to elevate the teacher and prepare the teacher to deliver that, and with our work to put kids in higher performing seats and expand ed freedom across the state, our high dosage tutoring efforts, we think that we'll continue to see accelerated results in the state of Louisiana.
Can you comment briefly on the role of universities in Louisiana in terms of teacher training? I mean, it just occurs to me as I'm sitting here, if we're talking about like a 10-year trajectory, there's been a lot of not turnover, but a lot of new entrants into the field over that time. And if I'm not mistaken, the vast majority of Louisiana teachers are produced by Louisiana colleges and universities. So not so, or I mean,
Not
just
not
comment
not
on
so
how
much.
they're
Yeah.
partnering.
So look, I will get in trouble again with this comment, but I am less concerned about certified teachers than I am quality teachers, and I
Okay.
recognize for us that could come from a number of different places. You may have some high quality teachers that come out of colleges of ed, but we have also done a lot of work around providing alternate pathways to the classroom from other professions and finding a way to assimilate intelligent, creative, energetic individuals into the classroom from other professions. We've done contracting. We have teacher apprenticeships now. We do an associate teacher program where we're building our own. And so we're really hitting this piece from all sides, appreciating that we do have a very fluid workforce, not in education, but in many sectors. But we want to do our part to make sure that kids have access to high quality teachers. Look, 3 years ago, we had 2,500 vacancies across the state. We were able to cut that to about 1,500, and now we're just under 1,000, I think. So we are making progress on the teaching vacancies, because for me, outside the parent, there's nothing more important than a high quality teacher for every kid armed with a robust curriculum. So we are looking at all approaches to staff schools, both in the classroom level, but also with school leaders.
What I think I hear you saying, Cade, is that the universities and teacher prep programs in Louisiana are maybe not as enthusiastic and full partners as we've heard other links in the chain are. You want to
Well,
either
we were very concerned about students graduating from pre-service programs in the state of Louisiana, not even close to being ready on day one to go into a classroom. They didn't understand the curriculums that were predominantly used in Louisiana classrooms. They didn't understand evaluation rubrics that their teachers would be evaluated in upon graduation. We actually passed legislation, Robert, that allowed the Department of Education to go into colleges of education, and the 3 required reading courses that pre-service teachers were required to take, we were essentially able to go in and take control of that coursework and transform it into the science of reading. And so our pre-service college partners have worked with us around that. I do think that we were the catalyst for the change, but they have worked with us on that. They are now working with us on looking at the evaluation instruments that we're using for teachers and making sure they're preparing teachers in college preparation programs for that rubric. They are looking at the most commonly used curriculum resources and providing exposure in college to those resources. So I think all of these things are good. But even as recently as yesterday in a legislative committee hearing, I was asked about this partnership, and I shared with the group that I think our next space here is going into these pre-service programs and looking at math preparation and making sure that students in colleges, whether they're in colleges of education or in other programs, if they're considering in any way stepping into a classroom, that we're doing everything that we are potentially able to do to make sure that they understand the expectation on day one, so that students will be numerate as a result of their teaching.
This is a really good transition to a question I've been dying to ask Darlene Opfer, who you have studied what teachers do and do not know about their own practice via the American Teacher Panels for a very long time, and you've oversampled Louisiana. And correct me if I've got this wrong, Darlene. It just seems like Louisiana teachers just have a better grasp on their standards, on their curriculum than the average American teacher.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. And that's the great thing about the panels. When we started them, it was just a national sample, and Julia and I were doing some work on content standards, some research on content standards. We had 4 states that agreed to participate. Louisiana was one of them. Looking at what teachers knew about content standards. And so we oversampled in Louisiana as part of the American Teacher Panel for that study. And as a result of that, we've had samples, state level samples from Louisiana for at least a decade. That's helped us understand what they've done really well. We've been able to feed it back to them. So they have been great users of our information, and we're very grateful for that. And at CCSSO, the states that she's working with also use our data, as she mentioned. But one of the things that we ask about teachers is not just what curricula materials they're using, but we also ask them some knowledge questions. Essentially, we embed a curriculum test in some of our surveys. And we're seeing over and over again that Louisiana teachers just understand both standards and instruction better than other teachers in other states. And it's to all the stuff that Kelly and Cade have been talking about that they do. They make sure their teachers know their curricula. They make sure their teachers understand how to use their curricula. And as a result, they just have more knowledge about instruction than we see in other states.
And I want to ask you to, if you wouldn't mind, to just kind of reflect on the conversation so far, and the degree to which any or all of these lessons that we're learning from Louisiana are applicable, not just to the 15 states that you work with, but are transportable nationwide.
No, absolutely. I think it's important to remember, of course, like we've said a few times in this conversation, that Louisiana really has been at this the longest, and that they've been incredibly consistent and have continued to iterate on it and improve on it. And that's to the benefit of course, their students and also to other states. One point I wanted to emphasize was around this intensity of use, which I know is something the folks in the SEA in Louisiana are really focused on, as are all the states in the network. So of course, it's great that the states in the IMPD network, that the teachers report using HQIM more regularly, right, than other states. because that we're really seeing the impact there of some of the policies, we think. But we don't want the educators to just be using them once a week, right? That's not our goal. Our goal is that they're really using them regularly. So through RAND, we also get data on intensity of use, and that is something that the states in the network are really focused on now. And through our work with RAND and looking at state data, we really see that if teachers are getting access to aligned professional learning, the intensity use goes up. If principals are encouraging teachers to use the instructional materials, that usage rate goes really high. So right now, states in the network are really thinking critically through what's the role they can play to scale high quality professional learning, and how can they also ensure that their strategy is building the capacity of principals to be instructional leaders in this work, and how are they also ensuring that all educators, your special educators, your intervention and support staff are receiving the same consistent message about access to high quality tier 1 curricula, and they're also getting that training and support to actually put it into place. So I do think that the states in the network are all continuing to learn from one another and build on this work. And the huge focus right now is how to increase the intensity of use of that. And that's going to take time because this is a big shift in instruction. The one last thing I would say is that we also, in the network, we are really focused on partnering with educator prep programs to incorporate a focus on high quality instructional materials into their pre-service courses, and also to incorporate a focus on the science of reading into their pre-service and methods courses. And that's really ongoing work. And what we've seen across the states in the network is really that need for a partnership, but also for the state to really step into the role that it can play in terms of if the state has the authority to do reviews and program approvals, that they can integrate that into that program or review process. But it's going to work better if they're doing it in, partnership with those EPPs to really help them see, hey, these are the materials we use in our state. This is science of reading is critical to us in our state. So we need you to be incorporating that into your work so that, teacher candidates coming into our schools are prepared to use the curriculum and meet the expectations that we have.
A question that occurs to me as I'm listening to the conversation is merely to wonder. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and my entire education career has been in this state and in the city of New York. Is there just a small state advantage here? In other words, I couldn't have told you at gunpoint, what the state education department was doing while I was in the classroom. But when you think about some of the rising states we're seeing, it's Mississippi, it's Louisiana. Is there something to be said for having that kind of, maybe Darlene, you can start this given your national view here. Is there just an advantage to having, being close to the ground in a small state?
Well, sure. I mean, on the face of it, because they have fewer people they need to get their message to and fewer people to work with. So I would say yes, but I actually don't think, I think the things that Louisiana specifically has done and the things that the 15 states and AND's network are doing, those are things and levers that can be pulled regardless of the size of your state. How you communicate with teachers, it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters if you have 6,000 or 6 million. If you have a solid communication strategy that is consistent and ongoing and just all the time, I don't think it matters how many are there. So, but I have a bias because I've seen it work in states like Louisiana, and I think that other states are missing out. And so I don't want to give them an excuse, if you will.
Yeah.
Oh, we're too big. We're too big to do what Louisiana did. No, you're not. So
No, no. Well, let me come at it a different way, and I'm not trying to encourage Cade Brumley to enter the transfer portal here, but if you were to wake up tomorrow and be the state superintendent of, California or Illinois or New York, where I live, would you adopt the same programs, or would you vary your pitches here?
Robert,
I would
a
not.
personal story here. So I know you're aware, I led as a system leader a rural suburban system of about 10 schools. And then I jumped up to the largest school system in the state of Louisiana. And while interviewing for that particular role, a board member asked the question, well, how are you going to make that transition? And I said, well, strategy is strategy and execution is execution. And, I believe that then. And so whenever I, made my way over to state superintendent, I just built a high capacity team that are values driven on aggressively and assertively pursuing relentlessly that every kid deserves a high quality education. And so while certainly the relationships might be different, the political pushbacks are going to come from different places. I can assure you that we fight every day against the establishment that wants to take us back. And we have to work every single day in our state to figure out how to continue to move us forward. And so all I can say about that is that I think that, building high quality teams that are values driven, that know how to execute and deliver results, they're really important wherever you are.
Yeah. Darlene, you just alluded to this a moment ago, and I want to ask you to drill down on it. In our pre-call before this webinar, you remarked on how struck you were by the level of communication from the state to districts and schools. Can you just say more about that?
Yeah, well, one is I want to say how consistent they are about the messaging. So you can have a lot of communication from the state or from districts down to teachers, but if it's incoherent or if it's mixed, it's not helping them. And so I think one of the things I want to say about Louisiana's communication is just how consistent it is and how regular it is. So, I think Kelly or Cade, I can't remember who mentioned the teacher leaders, but that just, the state talking directly to teachers, I think is really, really important because then the teachers hear the message directly and it's not getting filtered through all the layers in the system. It's, where we talk about like you play the telephone game, by the time it gets down to the teacher who knows what it is. In Louisiana, they're talking directly to their teachers. And so they know that the teachers get the message they want them to have. And I think that's hugely important.
Okay. We're going to go to audience questions in just one moment, but there was one thing, Cade, that you mentioned earlier that I want to kind of go back to, which is a little disconnected from the rest of this conversation, but you remarked on how there were still too many Louisiana students in schools that were not meeting their needs. And you have said many times, including today, you've remarked on how choice friendly you are, as it were. Can you just say a little bit more about, from your perspective, what is the playbook for the schools that are not up to standards, where kids are not being served well? What's the plan for those schools?
Yeah, so look, we're blessed in Louisiana to have a statute that allows me to recommend to our state board of education school takeover. And so even as recently as 2 weeks ago, we made a recommendation to our state board around a couple of schools that have been historically failing. F-rated schools in our state for way too long. We were, through statute, able to make a recommendation to our board. So we partnered with one of our high quality charter operators here in the state. And we essentially assumed those two district schools into our portfolio and then placed them into the hands of a high quality operator who will begin operating those schools and driving results up for those kids. But, I've also gone into school systems and met with their boards in open meeting and have encouraged them that, if they don't take action to close schools, to move kids into higher performing seats, if they don't take action to charter schools that aren't performing well, then I would take action. And so thankfully, on a number of occasions, local boards have made the judicious decision to move kids into higher performing traditional schools within their system and or charter schools where the kids could get a stronger education. And so, we believe deeply that educational freedom is important. And so we look at that as, most families in our state are choosing their traditional neighborhood school. So we want to make sure those are as high quality as they possibly can. But we have a robust and growing charter portfolio. We have a non-public sector that predates the public sector in our state around religious education. And so we now have moved into our governor's signature legislation, which is ESAs and scholarship accounts. So that will launch this year. And then the other thing is just homeschooling. You know, we've worked to protect the independence of homeschool families. And so we just think that a family needs to be in the driver's seat around the option that makes the most sense for them. And we try to help families understand what those options are, but we just want to make sure that every seat is a high quality seat.
Great. I'm just going to read a couple of questions that have come directly to me over the chat. Could someone speak more to the way curriculum is involved in Louisiana's intervention and differentiation efforts? Are the intervention programs across the state rooted in the state-supported high-quality curriculum, or are interventions done on a more local or individual basis? Kelly, you might be the best person to
Sure.
address that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So intervention has, as I said before, it's definitely increased and improved over the course of the few years. What I'm seeing is, of course, like for example, like Haggerty. That's one particular curriculum that's being utilized, and we've seen a huge increase with it. Focuses on phoneme segmentation and really looking at that area. And so our students have really increased in their Gibble scores in that particular area. And so finding those particular curriculums have definitely allowed us to support those students with a more prescribed assistance. Amplify is another one. It really works hand in hand with Gibbles, allowing to see where the students are, grouping them based on that area, and really support them as well. So with intervention, it's been definitely increased over the years, and really targeting specific students and how to support them based on the data that they're seeing.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. We actually passed legislation last session in our state that every student in grades kindergarten through 5 that is not proficient in academic content for reading and math has to have a dosage of tutoring weekly. And so they have to have that dosage. We have guidelines out around group size, around instructional resources, and they have to be HQIM. And so I really think that this effort that we're trying to take to scale around this high dosage tutoring through statute and through allocations or appropriations we've received from our state legislature really do hold promise for us to close achievement gaps, which we've been plagued with for a long, long time in our data. But close those gaps while also pushing forward those kids that are on grade level, not pulling them down, but accelerating everyone through this model.
Great. I love this question. It sounds like Louisiana thinks it knows the best, most high quality curricula and has commissioned teachers to identify them, so-called tier 1 curricula we were discussing earlier. Now they're trying to incentivize districts to adopt those curricula. Why not require it? Is this just about buy-in and maintaining good relationships, or are local districts really better equipped to make these decisions?
Yeah, I'll take it. So, we're able to go to the table legislatively or go to a meeting in communities and encourage the usage of high quality instructional materials. But we also are a state that's stubbornly local, for good or bad. And so in our statutes, we have protections for local systems of the decisions that they get to make. And unless they are identified as academically failing, the systems within the state are able to make their own curriculum decisions. So you could say it's yes to the entire question, I guess. But we have been able to use, again, levers like relationships. We've been able to use finance levers and only purchasing high quality instructional materials if a school system needed support, and our teacher leader army from across the state to help support the work. So that I would suggest that overwhelmingly, students in the state of Louisiana have access to high quality instructional materials without the state of Louisiana having to come in and mandate anything in particular.
Okay. I see you nodding, Darlene. Does that comport with your research?
Absolutely, and it goes back to the point I made earlier about big states versus small states. Like Louisiana didn't make anybody do anything. And so I think that's a really important part of this story, is that they used other levers to help people make better decisions.
Okay. And I know you wanted to weigh in as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Darlene, that's exactly the point I was going to make. And I think, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves too, right? Like over 90% of students in Louisiana have access to high quality instructional materials. And then and they haven't mandated it. So of course, and as we look across all the states, we have some states that we refer to as adoption states, but that's where they actually do have a more formal role to say, hey, this is what we recommend in terms of high quality instructional materials to really guide district decision making. But actually, no state really mandates it, but they have tremendous influence in terms of helping districts and schools see what is high quality and then to access that. And we've just seen huge increases in terms of access to high quality instructional materials without states necessarily having to mandate it. So I would just underscore Darlene's point as well.
Right. Louisiana's performance on NAEP is impressive, but one thing we see in Louisiana's NAEP performance and elsewhere is that it's easier to make progress in earlier grades. For example, Louisiana's fourth grade scores went up more than its eighth grade scores did. High school scores are generally even harder to move. Why do you think that is? What's Louisiana going to do about it?
Yeah, well, I'll take it. I've been very open and transparent about this. I think that our elementary students are benefiting from a comprehensive set of reforms that have been put in place. I also think, middle school students in our state and across the country were more pandemic impacted. I can't speak for other states, but I do believe as Louisiana students matriculate from elementary to middle grades, you'll see those eighth grade NAEP scores increase because they will have had higher quality experiences and higher quality seats. But the question is a really good question, and it's one we are trying to tackle. We know that we have to do more around adolescent literacy and adolescent numeracy and pushing in the high school. And it's not just enough to say, well, we're doing a better job in elementary. Those kids will get there one day. Sorry for those older kids right now. We can't do that. We have to continue to push in. And so we have a number of models that we are providing to pilot some various initiatives, particularly in the high school space, that we think can make a real difference moving forward.
I'm going to read this question with a caveat because it's predicated on an assumption that I do not know to be true. But with that said, I'll just read the question. I've read that low-income students in Louisiana do worse in school choice schools than in public schools. That's the piece that I don't know to be true. Do we know why and what can be done to fix or improve this? Why is the state school choice program considered, quote, the worst in the country?
Yeah, I guess I need to take that one. So Louisiana's scholarship or voucher program that has existed for about a decade is considered the worst in the country, and it's because it's heavily regulated, and it is a struggle to keep high quality schools in that program. And we are thankful for the ones that have remained in the program and are offering options to kids. But the assessments, for instance, aren't necessarily aligned to the mission of those schools. The assessments, for instance, aren't necessarily aligned to the standards being taught in those schools. And so I do think that with our Gator program, which is our new ESA model moving forward, and the support of the governor and the state legislature, I do think that students in that particular option will fare better than they have previously fared because assessments, which are nationally recognized assessments that they will be using, are aligned to the standards being taught in those schools and aligned to the mission of the schools.
Great. With apologies to our other panelists, most of the questions are for Dr. Brumley. I think that's not surprising given that we're here to discuss what's happening in Louisiana. So I'm just going to stay with Cade. We have a question, Dr. Brumley. Could you say a little more about what you mean by the relative, quote, quality of teachers? What is the methodology for measuring the quality of teachers in Louisiana?
Yeah, I don't think we live in a world where we can expect that teachers to staff schools across any state are going to all graduate from some college of education. They're going to move into a home next to their school and stay there for 30 years. I don't think that's realistic. And so what we have to realize is that we need education professionals, teachers that are coming from all walks of life. And it is a fluid workforce. And we need to knock down barriers that are preventing high quality people from coming into the classroom and offering their experiences and expertise to students. We also, if we're doing that, which we are, we also have to be very explicit around the onboarding process, not just initially, but in terms of their professional growth over a period of years, and making sure that they do have access to high quality materials. Because, and I shared this with the group most recently, it's crazy to think that someone who just walks into the classroom on day one should be able to go out and write their own curriculum and implement that to kids. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. So we need to make sure that they have access to high quality instructional materials. We need to make sure that they have access to mentor teachers, and then we need to evaluate their results. We need to coach them and evaluate their results. You know, we even have merit pay that we've introduced in the state of Louisiana, which I think is important. You know, we believe that if a teacher is doing a really great job, getting really great results for kids, they deserve additional compensation. And that's a new conversation in our state that we've been able to employ over the last 3 years. But we are looking at student data beginning of year, or rather the end of one year, looking all the way until the previous year and making determinations around teacher quality.
Here's a more broad question. The science of reading gets a lot of credit for boosting reading scores. Is there an analogous movement or body of research that has helped Louisiana increase its math scores?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a catchy science of reading tag to it, but we're talking a lot about the foundations of math and making sure that we are doing everything within our power moving forward to build fluency, numeracy fluency, math fluency in kids at a very early age. I think for us, that means a recommitment to building fluency and foundational skills, particularly on the elementary level, because we know that if a student has a deficit in math in second grade, it's going to grow worse in the third and worse in the fourth and worse in the fifth because it stacks upon each other. So we have to be committed to making sure that we've shored up gaps in foundational math skills early on, so that as those concepts grow more abstract in numeracy, as students get older, that they're prepared for that. Also, we passed legislation that requires all 4th through 8th grade math teachers in our state to undergo a state-sponsored math training, because what we found is that too many teachers in 4th through 8th grade, intermediate, middle grades math didn't have the content knowledge. It wasn't their fault. They maybe were pushed into a math job, or they may have accepted a math job because there wasn't anyone else who wanted to do that work. And so we need to make sure that we are training teachers in math appropriately. We need to make sure that we are providing resources to them. And also, we have identified math teachers as one of the teaching professions where we offer additional compensation to incentivize people to go into the math teaching space.
I want to give Ann and Kelly a chance to add on here. Ann, what are you seeing in terms of math instruction in the states that you work with?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. CCSSO actually, at the request of state chiefs, commissioned a report. We released it. It's called A Nation of Problem Solvers, and it really looks at what's the research that we know around what actually improves student learning outcomes in math. And a lot of what we see in the research is that real balance between procedural and conceptual understanding, and then the levers that states have are really the ones that we've been talking about too. So it's that access to high quality instructional materials in math that align professional learning, aligned interventions and supports. And teachers do need capacity building in that. They do need help in terms of understanding some of that content. I think that point Dr. Brumley made is really a strong one, and the state can really play a role in that. And I'll make a quick plug that CCSSO is actually hosting an event next week that is live, open to the public, that is on that report, A Nation of Problem Solvers, as well.
Terrific. Kelly, as somebody who spends her days on the front lines, as it were, working with schools, do you see the same level of kind of urgency about math that you're seeing with literacy?
Yeah, of course, literacy has been on the forefront, and that's been the big focus. So I'd love to see us move more into that direction. I do believe literacy plays a big role, not just in, but all subjects, So I think for math, we're going to start seeing, how they understand how to, not just with the reading support, but actually responding to the text. And math, we're having to respond. The students aren't just able to, do the math problem. They have to actually understand how to respond back. And and answer it in that way. I think a big piece is providing, just like we have with reading, is providing that PD training to our teachers and really ensuring that they have the instruction and they understand those standards. And so, a big piece what we do is focusing on what standards are they lacking. So really looking at the data and going back, okay, is this a student issue? Is this a teacher issue? And really ensuring that we're kind of bridging the gaps for both the students and the teachers, but then providing that, like we've been talking about, that high dose tutoring and making sure that we're really touching on those areas that the students are lacking in and making sure that we're focusing on whatever that specific standard is and addressing those skills as needed. So yeah, I think literacy is still in a focus, but I think math needs to kind of come to the forefront.
We are just about at time, but I can't resist asking Cade one more question. I got a text a moment ago from, I guess I probably shouldn't say who it's from, but trust me when I say it's somebody who we all know in this work, who says that this person is not convinced by your answer about whether you could do this in a large state. Do you want to have one more bite at that apple?
Tell them to shoot me a message and we'll have a conversation. But I'm committed to the kids in Louisiana, and I realize that I don't do this work alone. We have a lot of great support. We have amazing teachers. We have strong policy leaders, a governor that's helping us, and we're just thrilled to do the work, and we're thankful for where we are. But no, we have a lot of additional work to do.
Terrific. Boy, what this has just been a fun and engaging and enlightening conversation. I can't thank you all enough for your time and insights. Cade Brumley, Kelly Morris, and Bowles and Darlene Opfer, thank you very, very much. And to our audience, we will see you next month here at AI.